around 70,000 farms are potentially affected by this new inheritance tax measure. Blue-collar workers were the backbone of Britain for decades and decades. They've been gradually marginalised and wiped out, and the industries have either gone or been sold off. And what rights really do our governments have to tell farmers what to do with their own business?
I'm Jasmine Birtles, and today I'm joined by James Melville, who, among many other things, has started up the No Farmers, No Food campaign. Hello, James.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining, because we're going to talk about farming. I mean, it's a big topic right now, and about time, frankly, because it hasn't been a big enough topic. Thanks to you and a few other people who've been running campaigns, it has become a little bit more news recent times. But right now, it's the budget. What is the issue for farmers after the budget?
I mean, farmers have been put at huge jeopardy for a long time on many issues. Let's go back decades. Largely, it's connected to their ability to produce produce in terms of supply costs, production, but also government policies over the years. But it's come to a head with the budget, the new Labour government budget, where one of the measures put in was inheritance tax over £1 million worth in terms of assets on farms. Now, the reason why inheritance tax has been kept out of farms in the past is because farmers are largely, on a particular scale, cash poor, with overdrafts. It's a struggle for them on a month-by-month basis, but they're asset rich. The value is largely in the land. So with this government putting in this new policy, that affects, on recent numbers, around 70,000 farms are potentially affected by this new inheritance tax measure. Now, Labour have been pretty clever for their own nefarious reasons on this by saying it's £1 million above in terms of 20% inheritance tax, and always framing it like millionaire farmers. But that isn't the case for the reasons I've just pointed out. You know, farmers, they're struggling with their cash flow. And so to pay for this inheritance tax, um, they're likely to have to sell land because they don't have the cash, the supply of cash and facilities to pay for that. But it's future generations that will pay the price. Quite often, a lot of our family farms are legacy farms. They're 3 or 4 or 5 generations of farmers. And for farmers, and coming from a farming background, I understand this. What matters to them more than anything else is the custodianship of their own land and soil and countryside. It goes back generations. It's in their blood. And suddenly, because of this measure by the government, it's all up for grabs. And if we get to a point where family farms have to sell up, who are they actually going to sell to? Because would another farmer, effectively another family farmer, come in and buy it when they would then be liable for that 20% inheritance tax over the asset value of £1 million? That's questionable. So therefore, what's left? Well, what's left is local authorities, possibly under compulsory purchase, which the Labour government have quietly put in as well. That affects not just brownfields now, but potentially greenfields as well, or mega corporations, because then there's a kind of bypass on inheritance. So what inheritance tax is doing is affecting family farms. And that's why the phrase that's been developed over the last few days is a family farm tax. And there's been a lot of pressure put on by, the public at large are supportive because they see what this means to our food supply and to our farmers. And also, this issue has united the farming industry like no other, because farmers have got different scales, different priorities, and they don't agree on everything, and understandably so at times. But on this issue, they do. This is an existential threat to the farming industry, in particular family farms. And all we're trying to do right now is really hone in on this issue and put as much pressure on possible on the government, so ultimately the U-turn on this appalling policy.
And are we seeing support from farmers in other countries? Because in the last few years, we've seen all sorts of protests, particularly in Holland, in the Netherlands, really, and also, of course, even in Brussels. So are we seeing support from Europe, particularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, in a way, this blue collar rising started with the Canadian truckers, actually. And it sort of then moved into Europe with farmers and truckers. But it started with the Dutch, the second biggest exporting agricultural economy. And they felt undermined in a number of different measures from the EU and also their own governments. It then spread across Europe. Now, the European protests, there's a number of different issues affecting them, but ultimately it comes back to the farmers feeling that governments weren't either listening to them or, even worse, putting measures in place that were restricting their ability to grow crops and maintain their livelihoods. The UK, they've had protests as well, though. I mean, in Wales, for instance, the Welsh Labour government, they put in place the SFS, which was fundamentally about, in a way, restricting their ability to grow crops. And there was an economic impact assessment report that was produced about the amount of jobs, thousands of jobs were at risk, and also livestock and ultimately margins of profit from the farmers. And the Welsh conducted those protests completely peacefully. They galvanized huge communities to turn up at various points, and it was really well coordinated. But ultimately, it's not just about the farmers, it's a connection with the public as well. Because if you take from the farming point of view, even one issue, for instance, with supermarkets, where supermarkets are underpricing the purchase price on farmers, and on the other side of it, the consumers are getting fleeced by the supermarkets. So we've got a number of problems here. There's other things such as the lack of flood protection, the TB issue in Wales, the solar panel issue on prime farmland, which the Labour government seem hell bent on doing. And I really don't think there should be solar panels on prime farmland. Put it on car parks or motorways or brownfields, whatever, but not on our farmland. So ultimately, I think what's connecting the public with the farmers right now is two main reasons. A solidarity around the cost of living crisis, but also the farmers, I think, are the last blue collars standing. Blue collar workers were the backbone of Britain for decades and decades. They've been gradually marginalised and wiped out, and the industries have either gone or been sold off. The last one standing are the farmers, and ultimately one of the most important ones because it's the direct relationship with our own food supply and also the maintenance of our countryside.
And isn't there a sense right now that farmers are being told or encouraged not to grow food crops, that they're being encouraged to rewild fields, they're encouraged to, as you mentioned, well, grow fuel crops, and as you mentioned, put down solar panels, rather than actually growing food, which surely causes a problem for our food security?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the rewilding program under the different governments across the UK has been going on for some time. I mean, this is where you go into sort of the auspices of, the climate change debate and net zero. And part of that was linked to what happened in Wales with the SFS policy, where they saw that as almost a form of restrictive trade. And what rights really do our governments have to tell farmers what to do with their own business? And that's what it comes down to. And where it gets even more bizarre is it's not just a business that creates jobs or boosts local economies, which farming does, but it's also about our food supply. And that leads on to other issues, like, for instance, solar panels, whereby the Labour government are spending huge amounts of money on the net zero agenda. For instance, 22 billion on carbon capture machines. Personally, the best carbon capture machine of the lot is the natural ones that grow things, crops, plants, trees. And we seem to have forgotten the merits of old school environmentalism, where through ecosystems, photosynthesis, the relationship between the cultivation from the farmer into the soil, rotational farming, regenerative farming. And instead, we're moving into this other area whereby governments are going down the route of net zero, which is at great cost to the taxpayer. And then it combines both issues that, from net zero point of view, our food security put at threat, but also our energy security as well. And I think all these issues are coming at the same time, and farmers are like a center point of all of this because there's so many different government agendas that are disrupting the farming industry. But I think when we get to the stage of inheritance tax, going back to what I said at the start, that is the issue from an existential point of view that completely unites the farming industry. And I think inheritance tax for me is a cruel tax. I mean, regardless of the farming situation, I just don't think it should happen because, we're paying a multitude of different taxes while we're alive. both stealth tax and income tax and so on. And yet the bereaved are having to deal with the punishment of an inheritance tax quite often built up by individuals in their families who've built a legacy of their business that quite rightly they want to pass on to the next generation. And that particular framework and crisis particularly applies to farmers because of the scale of their land. And so the farmers are going in on this, uniting across the industry and putting a lot of pressure on the government. And I think on this one, if they keep up the pressure and all the good work done by many different campaigns across the industry, then hopefully by holding the government's feet to the fire, they will change this policy.
So finally, what can the ordinary person do who's not a farmer but is concerned about farming and particularly our food production? Is it joining the protest? Is it speaking to MPs, joining your campaigns? What sort of things can they do?
I think it's a number of things. It's all those things and many more. I'm a great believer that we cannot really alter a lot of things globally. It's too big. But we can create aspects of a domino effect by empowering ourselves locally. So it's where possible, buying from local farm. No, I know it's not easy for everyone, but buying food from local farm shops, creating sort of relationships with local farmers, setting up local campaign groups, you know, whether it's under the auspice of No Farmers, No Food, or even just doing stuff in their own community, empowering themselves on social media, setting up various campaign groups that are connected, not just to farming, but around food supply or another debate about healthy eating, putting pressure on local authorities, which I think is an important one. I've been involved in this down in Cornwall, by getting local authorities to prioritise the sale and the supply chains of local farm food into schools and hospitals rather than buying it in with no nutritional content, quite often ultra processed food from giant corporations. And I think that's what we can do as an individual. I think that's why farming is important. We as individuals can still make the choice about what we eat and about what food we buy.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's as much as possible bypassing the giant corporations and spending locally and getting to the straight source of food. You've got a lot of problems with supermarkets who are not packaging their products in terms of where it's actually from. You know, that should change as well. There should be a direct mark on every packet about exactly stating where that food is from. And I think individuals can vote with their own money. And one of the things they can do that is over their food purchases and develop them their own one-to-one relationship with supply chains in their local communities that go straight to their local farms.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, James. James Melville from No Farmers, No Food. And we'll work to support all of that.
Thank you.